So this isn't my personal story. It's from my friend, Jackson. We've been friends for 17 years, and in all that time, there's only one incident scarred in his memory. Years ago, we were on a camping trip with his family. It was the summer of 2008. We were relaxing on the way to our campsite. We arrived in a small town and decided to set up camp in their woods. Jackson's mom made dinner, and afterwards, we watched other camping videos. We made marshmallows, and we just all around had a fun time. Then, at roughly 8:30, we went to bed. And this is where we need to shift to Jackson's perspective. At around 1 a.m., he woke up, not knowing why, but since he was up, he decided to take a walk. It was around 5 minutes later when he heard something. He hadn't noticed it before, but there was a faint noise, a thump, drag, thump. Jackson, being the cocky shit that he is, muttered, "Assholes, don't know how to keep it down." He assumed it was a drunk, just taking long, exaggerated steps, but it stayed at the same volume. And then he got curious and walked towards the noise, hiding behind a bush when he got close enough. What he saw scared him so badly, he forgot to scream, and that's what saved him. A man was attempting to stick multiple dismembered body parts to a tree. He had a bag full of axes. That's what Jackson was hearing. The thump was the sound of the axe being used to stick a body to a tree, and the drag was from the man moving to the next tree. Then, the man looked directly at my friend, and Jackson ran. He somehow managed to lose the man, but he realized he was also lost. Switching to my perspective, I woke up hours later and I saw that Jackson was gone. I woke his parents and we eventually found him, but his clothes were torn, his eyes were baggy, and he was clearly in shock. We took him to the hospital and he began having nightmares. Every night, he'd wake up screaming, "Don't kill me, please." When he finally calmed down, he told me the story, and I believed him. I knew that he wouldn't lie to me. Now it's 14 years later. We're still good friends. This incident was never forgotten, only ignored, but I wanted to get it off my chest. I recently shared this story in a True Scary Stories Facebook group. I got a lot of feedback from people who lived in this area. It felt good to finally share my experience, so I'd like to leave it here as well. Well, shortly after posting, a woman contacted me to threaten myself and my family if I wrote about this man again. She believes he's innocent. It spooked me so much that I took my story down. I don't need weirdos like her in my life. I've since thought about this and decided to share my story again, but anonymously. It's my experience, and I'm not going to be frightened by some crazy bitch who dates child killers. So, here it is. I originally thought this incident happened in January of '84, but I now realize it was probably later in '83. I was 8 years old and lived in Aurora, Colorado, a suburb southeast of Denver. We lived in a brand new subdivision, and I loved it. Our ranch-style house was busy. I had 3 sisters, an older brother, a grandmother, and my mom living in our home. My 10-year-old sister and I shared a bedroom on the main floor. I loved this room. My twin bed was pushed against the wall that had the window facing our backyard, and at night, I liked pushing the curtains aside to look out. The window was elevated, but not so high that I couldn't easily see into the yard. My older sisters shared the room next to us, and my grandmother was in a large room across the small hallway. My mother stayed in a finished bedroom downstairs in the basement, and my brother had the rest of the basement. He was 16 at the time and had lots of friends that were always coming and going. I remember our house always being full of guests. We had a severe cold spell that week, so it was super icy outside. My sister and I had been playing in the backyard, which had not been enclosed with a fence. We had circular snow sleds that we would stand on and slide across the grass, and we left them strewn across the yard. That night, something woke me out of a sound sleep, and I thought about going downstairs to sleep with my mother. I did this from time to time, and she and I were really close. Then I heard a noise outside my window. It sounded like someone was slowly walking through the snow in the backyard. I could hear frozen grass crunching under their feet. Then I heard someone say, "Shit," and something clinked. I moved my curtain aside and I looked out the window. I expected to see my brother, one of his friends. He often came home past curfew and snuck through the backyard into an open basement window. I remember thinking he shouldn't be doing this on a school night, and in the morning, I planned to tell Mother that he woke me up. Only, it wasn't my brother. I saw a young man, probably in his early 20s, that I didn't recognize. I made eye contact with him and then quickly scanned the rest of the yard for my brother. I didn't see him anywhere. I was going to move away from the window, but the man's eyes were glued on mine, and he started walking towards my gaze. I froze. I couldn't move. He came as close as he could to the glass. He smiled at me. It was an eerie smile. It was an, "Oh look, you caught me doing something I shouldn't be doing," kind of smile. I remember he had crystal blue eyes, almost gray. Something about his expression was not right. Took me a few seconds to realize I was feeling fear. He was not a friend of my brother's, nor was he supposed to be in our yard at that time of night. I panicked, jumped out of bed, quickly ran downstairs to tell my mother. Once I got to the basement, I saw my brother was sound asleep. It scared me even more to know that the strange man was most likely not one of his friends. Mom calmed me down, came upstairs, turned on the outside light. She looked into the yard, but she didn't see anyone. She didn't make a big deal out of it, and I ended up spending the rest of the night with her, but I didn't sleep well. I wondered, why was the man in our yard? Where had he gone? I was also scared he might come back. I don't know the exact timeline, but it was roughly a few weeks later when a family was murdered by an intruder with a hammer and a knife in the middle of the night. The father, mother, and 7-year-old daughter were killed, and the 3-year-old daughter was left for dead but miraculously survived. This crime sent our entire community over the edge. The police didn't seem to know who did this horrible thing or why. All we knew was that the hammer killer probably chose the house at random, came through an open garage door. No one in my family ever mentioned the man I saw again, but I asked my mother about it years later and she tensed up. The hammer killer. The case went cold, the community moved on, and I moved further south. I never forgot that man in my yard, though, and I always felt that he might have been the same man who murdered that family. As years went by, more information came out. They linked the murder to a vicious murderer and rapist of women in another community. Thanks to DNA, they also linked him to a savage attack on a couple and a flight attendant in Aurora. He was a serial predator and active in our community that whole time. Fast forward to 2019, I'm watching the news and I can't believe it. They solved that murdered family's cold case from 1984, as well as the other attacks. They flashed the suspect's picture across the screen, and my heart stopped. It was him. the man I saw as a child. He frightened me so badly. His face is etched into my memory. I said something about it to my brother, but he just shrugged it off. I mentioned it to some friends and they said it was creepy, but there was no way that I could have remembered something like that. I thought that they might be right, until later. The news also showed photos of the suspect when he was younger. That is exactly the man I saw. I know it. It's changed the way I think about things. It's changed the gratitude I feel for my life. What if he hadn't tripped on those sleds and somehow made it into our house? My sisters and I could have been the ones on the news.